So, here you are, you're, flying along, you upgrade, now you're a captain at Sandpiper. And can you remember a time at Sandpiper when you had an in-flight emergency and that, like off the top of your head, and how did you handle it?
Yeah. They were usually, how many? I've had several. They were usually all minor. I would consider minor. I had a bleeder overheat once coming out of someplace in the Midwest, and I just landed 100 miles later. And it turned out to be a false indication. I've had, I'm trying to remember, they kind of all blend. I had, this one significant one. I had coming out of Dallas, going to Joplin. I was the first officer, so I was in the right seat in the 145. And prior to getting into Joplin, there was thunderstorms over Joplin, and there was a line that was just moving over Joplin. So we requested holding for about 15 minutes. And judging from how fast that line was moving, we figured that's all we would need if we needed that. And we were up at 370. So that we got into we requested holding pattern on course, and they just gave us a point right in front of us to just go directly into a hold, and just hold until the thunderstorms pass, and then we just descend and land. But we did it up at 370. We slowed to our holding speed, but we entered IMC, and prior to the holding point. There wasn't any storms or anything, but it was IMC, so everything was obscured. And whenever I go up to IMC at altitude, I'm always watching the airspeeds, just for any kind of blocked PDOT tubes. And I was flying. I was the pilot flying, and so everything was coupled to my side. And just standard entry and direct entry and a direct entry into the hold, right? Start the 180-degree turn, and so I'm cross-checking airspeed because I always do that. And I start to see just a minor split between the airspeeds. The first knot or two, I really didn't say anything. When it got past 3 knots, and it wasn't a sudden and abrupt split, it was just a nice slow. As we were progressing into the turn, it was getting worse and worse. So I expected a little bit just from the turn, but then it just kept going. It got to about 3 knots, 4 knots, and that's when I said something to the captain. I said, "Hey, Captain, I'm seeing an airspeed, whoever he was, I'm seeing an airspeed split between the right and left side, and it looks to me like the standby indicator is matching your side. So I'm going to assume that I have something going on with my airspeed indication. So we just need to keep an eye on it." And after that, it just continued to split farther and farther at about the same slow rate. And when it hit about 5 knots a split, that's when we got a comparator warning for airspeed indication, 5 or 6 knots, whatever it was in the Embraer. So the comparator indication appeared, because that's when it sensed it.
Right.
And that was about a minute after I noticed it happening. So, and we got to about, it was obviously 180-degree turn entering the hold. And once we came out of that turn, now we were pointing the other way, and the airspeed split about 7 or 8 knots and wings level. And so now we know we have a problem. So we tell air traffic control we have an instrument problem with the airspeed, and we just want to leave the hold at this heading right now. Because it's perfect, because it's 180 degrees out of IMC, right? So we know we're leaving IMC, and I kind of figured it was high altitude crystal icing clogging up the PDOT tube on my side, which is the same thing that happened to Air France 447, and the same thing that happened to me in the Navy at least once. And those are all attributable to weak PDOT tube heaters. So basically the ice crystals build up in the PDOT tube at a rate that's higher than the heater can actually melt the ice, and it just becomes blocked. And at some point the heater's going to catch up, and it's going to melt the ice, and it'll just come out the little weep hole in the back of the PDOT tube, and you'll be good, right?
Right.
Usually that's what happens.
Usually,
but not with this one. We accumulated so much high altitude crystalline icing. My airspeed, after we rolled out, my airspeed continued to drop off, and the captain's was fine.
Wow.
So, and the standby was fine. So that So I suspect right off the bat I got a weak PDOT tube heater. And that's usually what it is. And that was, Air France 447 had an AD out on that airplane for weak PDOT tube heaters for all the Airbus fleet at that time. And some of them were taken care of. That one wasn't. They hadn't gotten to the AD yet. Their airworthiness directive. They hadn't repaired that airplane yet, which was really all it is just doing a current check on the PDOT tube heater. So you do a current check, see how much current it's drawing. If it's not drawing enough current within a specific limit that's actually outlined, between this many amps and this many amps, you change it. It's real simple.
Yep.
That's how you check the PDOT tube heater. It's a simple freaking electrical test. Or you just measure the resistance of the heater with an ohm meter. You disconnect it and put an ohm meter on it, see what the resistance, and there should be a certain value. It's a really simple check. And if it's not good, you just swap out the PDOT tube, put in a different one. And so my airspeed continues to drop off on my side, and we decide, give you the airplane. So I transferred control over the captain because he had the good airspeed indication, switched the flight director over that. But that didn't really matter because the airspeed just continued to drop off. And at about 20 knots, we started getting IOW ICAS messages, which is the weight on wheel switches, which is kind of peculiar until you understand exactly how the switches, all that stuff's kind of working. And then all of a sudden, all sorts of other ICAS messages just start lining up down the ICAS. And the autopilot kicks off, the yaw damper kicks off, and we request immediate descent to flight level 240. So we start descending, and during the descent, we declared an emergency at that point. And during the descent, temperature starts warming up, but my airspeed continued to decline, and it went all the way down below 40 knots and red X'd on me.
Wow.
It just completely red X'd.
It's more than just a blocked pitot tube then at that point, or frozen.
That is what it was. It was
it just frozen?
Blocked. Yeah.
Wow.
That's all it was. And so it wasn't a big deal. The captain's flying the plane. He's got control of it. And at some point, we exit IMC, and we decide to go to our alternate, which is Kansas City, which was just basically, we were going almost directly 090 prior to the hold. After the hold, now we're going 270, so we're going directly west. ATC just gives us a vector, fly heading 360. I mean, it's like easiest. Makes a 90-degree turn to the right. We exit IMC. We land in Kansas City, no problems. After we exit IMC, at some point, all my airspeed indication come back.
Oh, it did not come back. Okay.
ICAS messages disappear, and everything starts working normally again.
Wow.
Which is what you would expect with a weak PDOT tube heater.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
scary still. I mean,
that's all it was with Air France 447. Yeah, but look what they did. So
they didn't recognize, and Airbus logic. The Airbus is so automated that
it was, to me, it was the stupidest thing.
Pitch and power, man. Pitch and power. You back to basics.
And that's something you're trained in the Navy. Even as a flight engineer, I was trained in pitch and power. Yeah. We had pitch and power charts out the yin yang. So, I mean, it's just the most basic private pilot training for a blocked PDOT tube.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like one of the first lessons when you're dealing with private pilot licenses. What happens if you get a bug in the pitot tube?
What are you going to see if your PDOT tube's blocked? How do you recognize it? Because the first step is always, for any problem, is to recognize that you have one. And that applies well beyond anything in aviation. So the first step is, what kind of problem? Are you having a problem? Because if you're flying a plane, you should always be looking for problems.
That's it.
That's
always
your
looking
job.
for an out. What's it doing?
Yeah, flying the plane is the easy part. Looking for problems, that's the secondary part. That's a little bit tougher. Recognizing these problems is a little bit tougher. And the more you fly, the more experience you get. That's where experience comes in, is to recognize issues. So you could recognize issues with better experience. You could get that kind of training. Training will help. Training actually makes up for a lack of experience if the training is good enough.
Yeah. By definition, knowledge is a change in behavior by result of experience. So
exactly.
Old, bold pilots, not many of them around, but those that are.
Pilots and bold pilots, and not too many old
bold pilots.